Okay, Marty's the host now. Marty, can you make me the host?
Trying. Make host. Do you want to change the host to Sylvia? Yes, I sure do. All right.
Okay. All right. All right.
Mission accomplished.
I'm going to go ahead and call on our attendees, and I see the new superintendent of the WCC-USD School District, Mr. Chris Hurst. I'm going to go ahead and allow him to talk. And Superintendent Hurst, you should be able to speak now.
Well, I'd like to say good evening to everyone. I wish you all could see me. I'm the new superintendent, Chris Hurst, and it's an honor to be in the community. And I just bring greetings from Washington State on the east side, close to Spokane area. It's in a little community called Othello. And I also wanted to share with you, prior to me being a superintendent in Othello, I actually was living in Southern California for the past 35 years. And I lived in the San Diego area, worked in San Diego Unified and Poway, if you're familiar with that area, and also in Oceanside. I have a wife, I have 2 kids, and I have 8 grandkids. And I would just say it's an honor to be here and serving all of you. And I just wanted to just come in and introduce myself and just say hi to everyone. It's good to be here.
Thank you and welcome. And for folks in the audience, we are thrilled to have Mr. Hurst with us, and he will be spending a bit of time in Kensington right off the bat because our longtime principal, Judy Sanders, is retiring after 14 years as principal and more than that as a parent and teacher at Hilltop. She spent 25 years total with that school. So we'll be looking forward to the leadership of Mr. Hurst. Thank you for joining us this evening to say hello. And we're going to go now to Linnea Dew. Linnea, you can go ahead and you should be able to speak.
This is just a technical issue. Sylvia, it's really hard to hear you. I can hear everybody else just fine. But I'm thinking maybe it's because you're wearing headphones or I don't know what it is, but your voice is very, very soft.
Okay, thank you. I will try to fix that right now. Is this any better? Was this any better?
Yeah, that is better.
Okay, I appreciate your assistance in letting me know that. Okay. And we have one more person. And that is A. Stevens Delk. So Delk, you should be able to speak now. Delk, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right. I'm sorry.
No problem.
I didn't get my hand lowered fast enough. I was going to say also that I couldn't hear you, Sylvia. I could hear everybody else. And in fact, when they came on, it blasted me out and my hearing aids started buzzing. So thank you for adjusting your microphone.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting me know and welcome. Okay, we are going to move on. Okay, so with no more public comment, and if there are no other comments from our panelists, then I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the items on the consent calendar, which consist of the regular and special meeting minutes of May 13th, 2021 and May 26th, 2021 with the correction of Candy Capagrossi's name, and the April 2021 financial reports. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Thank you. And I will call the roll just to keep things simple for this evening. Vice President Natoli. Vice President Natoli.
Yes, sorry, I was on mute.
Okay, that's a yes. Director Deppie?
Yes.
And Director Sharaswat?
Yes.
And I vote yes, so the consent calendar is adopted 4-0. We're now going to be receiving a presentation from staff, the first time that we'll discuss and see the 2021-2022 budget. So I would like to ask Marty, and she will be accompanied by Catherine Korsak, to go ahead and introduce the item and begin the presentation.
Marty, you're muted.
Yes, I see that. Are you ready to share the screen?
Yes.
So Catherine's going to change the slides for us. Before we get started, I just want to quickly say that this was a huge team effort, Herculean, a lot of work by Catherine Korsak, and want to thank her for all of her efforts in preparing the budget this year. And we're going to be, I'll be going through the PowerPoint, but really we're going to be pitch hitting together, Catherine, myself, and the Chief of Police as needed as questions come in. So we'll see how that goes towards the end. And then also I wanted to just mention a little bit about process. You know, I expect that there'll be lots of questions tonight from both and feedback from the board as well as the public. For the question part in particular with the public, we've already gotten some really great detailed questions from one member of the public. I expect more. The thought was that we would try to get through the budget process tonight, and then in the public meeting on June 17th, update this presentation and drill down with more answers to the questions that come in either via email and or verbally tonight. We will be taking notes and writing those down and preparing to answer those via the June 17th public workshop. So I just wanted to let everybody know that we will be making, you know, revisions as appropriate for the June 17th meeting, so we can answer those detailed questions from the public. So with that, let's go on to the next slide, please. So this year's presentation, we made some budget assumptions. So we wanted to say what those were right up front to the board and the public. And certainly these can be changed at the board's discretion. We'll go through those. Kind of the big picture on the operating budget, fund balances, some recommended budget changes and expenditures, a brief slide on the public safety building, still lots of work to be done there, and relocation, proposed apparatus replacement schedule, staffing changes, government transparency, and some thoughts about planning for the future, especially as we approach the board's strategic planning workshop later this calendar year. Next slide. So for those budget assumptions, we made an assumption in building the budget that the board would recommend and approve an increase in the police tax with a CPI of 3.8%, which is the maximum permitted. We did not include public safety building tenant improvement and or relocation costs. It's a huge, at this point, without bringing in some additional expertise, that number is just really wide ranging and too wide a range to actually include in the budget. We don't anticipate those costs coming into play until really well into the second half of the fiscal year, when we could do a mid-year budget amendment at that time. And of course, we will have much better sense of the cost for any kind of relocation costs. We also made an assumption that we would reimburse ourselves $50,000 from our OPEB trust. And we can drill down into more about what that means. Catherine can give everybody an update on what that would mean. In addition, we made assumption that retiree dental and vision would, we would discontinue paying retiree dental and vision at approximately $25,000 a year savings. And cost allocation of staff time across, for now, 3 funds, although we are proposing to create a waste management fund as well as a capital project fund. But at this time, there's not really a capital project, so no allocation would be proposed of staff time to that fund. So eventually there would be 4 funds, of course, but this year, allocating our staff time through the general fund, landscape maintenance district fund, and then this, what we're hoping to be a newly established waste management fund. And then there's a big jump in revenue, and we just wanted to acknowledge that jump comes from last fiscal year to this fiscal year is coming from projected grant revenue from Prop 68. We still need to identify a park project, as well as a Measure WW grant reimbursement that we expect to come in the next fiscal year. Next slide. So looking at the big projected budgets for the year, General fund is just a little over 3.5 million. Landscape lighting district, roughly 42,000. The hopefully newly established waste management fund would be about 62,000, and a capital project fund would be approximately 335,000, and that includes those grant funds that we just were discussing. And so the total operating budget for the new fiscal year is proposed to be just over $4 million. Next slide. The audited starting fund balance for June 30th, 2020, you just saw the audit in April, and it was came in at just over 2.1 million. We're projecting this year's fund balance to end, of course, it's unaudited at this point, but at approximately just under 2.3 million. Projected revenues, again, are around 4 million. Expenditures, a little under 3.9 million. And projected ending fund balance for next year, June 2022, is just around $2.4 million. Next slide. So looking at the major revenue sources, budgeted and projected, and we're looking really at kind of this past fiscal year, what was budgeted and approved in June of 2020, and then what we're projecting it to end at in 2021 in another 3 weeks, and then looking out projected for next year's revenues, a breakdown by a source here. As you can see, there's been a steady increase in most categories over this past fiscal year, really with just the exception of Parks and Rec. And of course, I think, with the community center closed, everybody can understand why there's really zero revenue there, as well as interest income. And mainly, interest income. And so projected for next year is, again, little bit projected, maybe less in some categories like the property tax versus what we actually are projecting to end out this year. But overall, projecting a little bit of an increase in several other categories here in our sources, especially that big jump in grants, as we just talked about. Little bit of a decrease again in interest income, as well as contributions. There aren't any expected this next year. And other miscellaneous income also going down slightly for the total projected budget of around $4 million. Next slide. Major expenses by department. So 2021, we saw that there were a decrease in several projected versus budgeted, how we're ending the year. And that's, of course, that's some turnover in staffing and some changing in staffing. And the former interim general manager working a little less hours than I work is one area that I know of, and some other staffing changes as well. And so the difference overall is a positive, though. So we, for the most part, have incurred quite a bit of savings this past fiscal year. And the only place that's not the case is capital projects, which is related to the community center and paying out and finishing that project. Next slide. So major revenue 3-year comparison, looking at going back to 2019-20, the actual to the budgeted this past fiscal year versus also the projected, what we expect to finish out in another 3 weeks versus next year's projected. You can see, generally speaking, a steady increase, and overall in these major revenue sources. I don't think there's any really big surprises here other than in the grant, again, in the grant line item. Most of the rest of this is related to CPI increases in property tax and other taxes as well. Next slide. 3-year expense comparison. Again, looking at 2019-20 actual and this last fiscal year, and then projected for next year. We're seeing obviously a steady increase in expenses. In particular, the district recently executed not that long ago an MOU with the KPOA. So there's some changes in salary increases there expected. Obviously there's some proposed proposed structural changes for this year that we'll be talking about later that also incurs some additional costs in administration. And in waste management line item, that is a placeholder for potential trash cans, which I'm sure we'll have lots to discuss about that a little bit later. But overall, a change from 1920 to 21-22 of, you know, just 220,000 roughly, more or less. Next slide. Projected new revenue. So for this next year, we're planning to open up the community center June 15th to start allowing rentals in addition to the use by KCC. So we looked at a prior year's projections and we kept those the same. Of course, if the master fee schedule that we'll be discussing later this evening comes under consideration and any increases come from that fee schedule or fee structure, then we could see an increase beyond this 30,000. Then there's the grants that we already spoke about, Measure WW grant, Prop 68, and the COPS grant. There's the potential for the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. We've been lobbying hard the state to see if we can get some of those funds because it's not a guarantee. But I just want to add that that is not actually built into the budget. So, you know, if we didn't get anything from these funds, it has no impact on the current budget because we did not try to account for it. Next slide. So some recommended budget changes for this year in the police department, moving, you know, piloting 9 sworn officers instead of the 10 that most recently we've had. I know that last year it was budgeted at 9.5, but we did have recently, for at least a portion of this last fiscal year, 10 officers, expecting a $65,000 to $90,000 a year savings from budgeting for 9 sworn officers. Funding a new lieutenant position in lieu of the captain position. This would be a management position. It would not be in the KPOA, bringing an additional $35,000 a year savings. And then leasing 1 new police vehicle at approximately $12,000 this next fiscal year. Next slide. And the police department has a number of DOJ requirements and that need to be addressed and are required. So not too much choice in a lot of these items. The detailed crime reporting software, NEBRS, about $25,000. EBCRS for radio communications, just under 10,000. We would be splitting the software for that radio communications infrastructure over 2 fiscal years, recommending that. So 9,000 this year, 9,000 next year. Net Presenters, a digital communication platform for $1,000, very helpful to the police department. And then Lexipol training bulletins, which is you know, the state-of-the-art training software program for keeping police up to date with training bulletins and best practices. Next slide. So recommended budget changes and expenses. Now in the Parks and Rec, there's quite a few recommendations here that are mostly one-time expenses and to try to address some of the deferred maintenance in parks and facilities. So starting off, one recommendation is to look at assessing the annex building and how, you know, the cost of renovating that. So we put a placeholder of $5,000 in there. We have already done an initial assessment to get an idea of kind of the deeper dive, if you will, that we would need to do on assessing the building. And then starting to look at, of course, through the strategic planning process, having the board take a look at their goals and objectives for the annex building and the purpose and use, because that certainly will have an impact on the renovation costs. Potentially, other items include a security alarm for the community center, security cameras, rekeying the community center with an electronic system that would allow for easier access from the public and staff, and just make it easier to manage overall, a little less staff time of running up to the community center and then issuing keys. So I think this would really save a lot of staff time and actually the time of the community and public. Another recommendation is white folding chairs. We've got round white tables and possibility of renting the facility for weddings and other formal functions would increase with the ability to rent everything as a set, covering the AC unit that's outside the community center meeting room door 3, repairing the retaining wall on the Arlington, and replacing the tennis court backboard. Next slide. I do just want to mention quickly that all of these numbers are based on actual estimates. We actually went out and in some cases got multiple estimates and kind of took the average, especially like with the electronic keying system of the community center, for example. So I just wanted to let everybody know that we didn't just sit around and make up these numbers. Other possible repair of the renovations and improvements could be the repair of the sprinkling valves in the upper lawn, repairing the upper lawn. It's got a lot of holes and is fairly bumpy to walk around on. Potentially some new trash cans. We need to work with Bayview and talk about some trash cans in the park in particular, and using waste management funds to pay for that. So that number could potentially, of course, change, go down probably. Tree removal and hazardous brush in park. So this is sort of a bit of a catch-all category that includes the projects that Vice President Natoli worked on back in the winter of 2019, looking and getting cost estimates for removing several trees in the park and tree limbing as well. So we've put that in this category as well, because there's also, Fernando did a walk around with the park with the fire inspector to identify other areas in the park that have hazardous undergrowth and brush and the kinds of fire prevention activities that we could undertake. And we included that in this cost estimate as well. Another item is surveying the park perimeter. I've talked to a couple of surveyors, and I think this could actually normally be quite a bit more costly, but I think we came up with a strategy for being able to survey the entire perimeter of the park and really be able to have a legal document that would delineate what is park property versus private property and other public agencies. Repair the storm drain and trench plate. We did get an estimate for this, but additional due diligence is required. I need to talk with the county and make sure, see if they don't actually own Highland and this portion of where this trench plate is. So there's some debate there about whether, the proper ownership of this site. So additional due diligence needs to be done there. But in the event that we do own it, we would be ready and prepared to move forward with it. And then replace and sort of repair, in some cases repair the stairs from the E building up toward the school. And we could also look at talking to the Eagle Scouts about possibly participating in some repair and replacement of those stairs. Next slide. I wanted to also mention the KCC donation from earlier this year. The $15,000 is in the budget. And we had a couple of items that we thought needed to be repaired, and ran it by the KCC board to see if they would be amenable to using their funds for replacing and installing a new bench that's needs to be replaced just outside the doors of the community center, as well as repairing the sprinklers in the lawn, the round lawn, circular lawn adjacent to the community center. Other potential improvements for that $15,000 that KCC identified was replacing the grass of the circular lawn and the 2 round circular raised beds that's outside the community center, and replacing any other outdoor benches as necessary. Next slide. So when it comes to the public safety building and relocation, I mean, there's still quite a bit I can't really talk about at this point. I mean, we're looking at relocation options and developing a needs assessment for tenant improvements, and then estimating sort of the long-term, temporary relocation costs. At this point, this is kind of the best ballpark that we were able to come up with without some expertise involved, which I have not yet secured in helping us to identify those costs, but that's something that I'll be doing very soon and very quickly. Continuing dialogue and negotiations with the fire district and talking about transitioning out of the public safety building. And then of course, as I mentioned earlier, we did not work anything in here because in the budget related to tenant improvements or moving or relocation, because it's such the range of the number is so unknown. And at the same time, we don't really expect any impact until the fourth quarter, which we could always do a mid-year budget amendment if necessary. So next slide. The apparatus replacement schedule. So here is, I might need some help from the chief, but it's a little confusing, but so as you can see, if you look at the far right column, we have some, scheduled projected replacement timeframe for each of these vehicles. The 2012 pool car is already surplus. And so that would already would be, decommissioned and go away, basically. These other vehicles listed here, the 2016 car, we would be projecting to replace that in the 23-24 fiscal year. And the other two vehicles would be in later years, 26, 27, and 28 and 29. Next slide. And then we have these 4 vehicles. So in this slide, you'll see that we are projecting the 2014 K2 vehicle, the first vehicle in this list, to be, if approved by the board, to be replaced in this fiscal year. And then again, the 2015 K3 would also be replaced in 23-24. So the proposal would be in 23-24, 2 vehicles. Next fiscal year, there would be no vehicles in 22-23. And then the next 2 would be 27 and 28, the last 2 vehicles. Next slide. So just looking at a little bit of analysis around the fleet replacement and thought process around that, and a little bit of background. In 2020, 2 patrol units accounted for approximately 17,000 of unexpected repairs. So, the older the vehicle, of course, the more unknown it gets, how long that's we're gonna be able to continue with those vehicles. 2 employees are required. In fact, this just happened this past week, drop off 1 car while being serviced. So that's a strain on what's potentially going to be a 9-employee department. Out of warranty repairs are also pretty significant. For example, patrol unit K2, the repair costs exceed $16,000 out of warranty. Unit K3, major service and repair costs exceed $5,000. The vehicle value and reliability decreases with age. I think we all know that. It's the same thing with our own cars, right? Since the introduction of the 3 new hybrid cars in 2021, maintenance and repair costs for the fleet have been under $500, and the cars came with some major component warranties that are going to help out in the future, 100,000 miles in 5 years. Some other observations is that there's been a significant decrease in fuel usage with the new vehicles, and even as fuel prices across the country are going up. Next slide. So overall proposed staffing changes for the next fiscal year are, as mentioned earlier, a new lieutenant position that would be in lieu of the captain position. That would be a management position, and the captain position would remain vacant. It is still in the job roster though for the district. A new office manager / clerk of the board, full-time position to replace the functions and duties of the police service specialist position. Do some parks and recreation coordination around scheduling of the community center and any other facilities and assets. Clerk of the board functions, and then also administrative assistant, answering phones and reception in the lobby, part-time. And then a full-time senior accountant position that would replace the current part-time position, as well as most of Mays and Associates Consulting that we still incur, and also some of the budget manager's current duties. Next slide. As you can see here is a cost comparison of proposed staffing changes. So the current staffing levels, this includes all the administrative staff, as well as the police captain position, since in the tables next to it, it's being replaced by a police lieutenant. It seemed important to show that comparison, but most of the left-hand slide is administrative staff, totaling $608,000. And in the right-hand, table, the proposed staffing would total just under $600,000. It's worth noting that the cost estimates for the proposed staffing include health, dental, and vision for 3 administrative employees, and not included is any of the potential savings that could come from labor negotiations and or savings from budgeting for 9 sworn officers, as mentioned earlier, instead of 10, or what technically was budgeted last year, 9.5. Next slide. And going back to that cost allocation across funds, as I mentioned earlier, we don't really have a capital project at this time, but in the future, if we did, we would have a 4th or 5th column here that would be capital project fund. But the proposal is to start allocating administrative staff, as well as our independent contractors for parks and facilities across these three funds: general fund, landscape, and lighting, and waste management, to kind of more accurately reflect our usage of time and how it impacts the various services that are offered through those funds. Next slide. This is also the proposed organization chart based on the proposed staffing. As you can see, in the general manager position, the positions that would basically be all management level, reporting to the general manager, the chief of police, the finance director. That's basically changing the finance and business manager's title to finance director, and then this new office manager / clerk of the board. A senior accountant reporting to the finance director, and then with the 9 sworn officer structure, a lieutenant reporting to the chief of police, 2 sergeants, and 5 patrol officers. The parks and recreation contractors for park landscape and facility management, I have a dash line since they're not permanent employees, reporting to the general manager and overseeing their activities. Next slide. As you may recall from the last presentation on kind of, where the finance department and finances in the district have come, these next 2 slides will be very familiar. These are pretty much what we had in that presentation, which are things that in terms of government transparency, we want to continue to work on, developing finance and HR policies, refining the budget process, ensuring audit readiness, and developing that short, mid, and long-term financial forecasting and projections. Next slide. And in addition to that, we'd like to institute the class function of QuickBooks, which will allow for the kind of fund accounting that is preferred in public sector budgeting. It's not exactly an apples to apples comparison, but it'll allow us to get closer to fund accounting at a price point the district can afford. Review procurement policies and refine procedures, implement a fixed asset module, continue to refine financial reporting, assess and approve GAAP compliance, and assess and improve internal control framework. Next slide. And finally, just planning for the future. These are things that I could see some of them being potentially part of the board's upcoming strategic planning process. Obviously, immediate concern is planning for a new temporary or permanent home for KPPCSD. Consider increasing the landscape maintenance district. Currently, the general fund subsidizes Parks and Rec and the LLMD fund by the tune of $50,000 to $70,000 a year. Continue looking for future purpose and renovation of the annex building and identifying what that purpose actually would be, forecasting and preparing future revenues and expenditures, exploring other district funding structures possibly, consider upcoming work for the general manager. Will be considering new agreements. I think Bayview is approximately 2 years out from a new franchise agreement, and we need to also work with KCC on a new agreement. Implement the Prop 68 grant, we need to define a park project basically before December of this year, and notify the state of what that project would be and make sure it qualifies. So that will be another opportunity for public engagement and input. Consider cost sharing and volunteering opportunities. I put in an example, the crossing guard. This year, our contract increased from $15,000 to a little over $18,000. So if there's cross-sharing opportunities out there, that would be great and helpful to the district. And then continuing to consider other employee and retiree cost-saving measures via the labor negotiations process. Next slide. So the next steps are the second public budget workshop, which will be next Thursday, June 17th at 6 o'clock. And it will be staff-led meeting for the public. It will not be a board meeting. It will only focus on the budget. And as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, we would like to use that opportunity to address any incoming questions from the public, either via email or tonight via public comment. And then on the 29th will be consideration of the final budget by the board at a special board meeting, June 29th at 7 o'clock. That concludes our presentation, and we're ready for questions, answers. And like I said before, it's going to be a team effort. Catherine, Mike, and myself are here to answer any questions and take notes on your feedback.
Thank you very much. like to go ahead and open it, if I could, first to board members to begin with any questions or comments they have on the presentation that Marty made. And of course, there were other attachments that you may have questions or comments on. So any board members want to kick things off? Okay. I would just like to say thank you to the general manager and the chief of police for working so cooperatively together and for really taking into consideration some things that I think the community has been looking forward to and asking for quite some time around resources. I know that the police had originally wanted 2 cars this year, and I appreciate them going down to 1, and also being willing to try a slightly leaner staffing model, and also appreciate the consolidation of functions that the general manager is looking at. I know that's not easy to do sometimes, but I think it is in the best interest of the district to put together some opportunities where there is actually some efficiencies. So I appreciate that. I see that Directors Deppy and Sheriff Watt and Natoli have raised their hands, so I will stop stalling. And no, I wasn't stalling. Director Deppy, why don't you go ahead first?
Okay, I'll start with the easy ones. Could you explain, Marty, all the grants and how sure you are the money is coming in, and how are we going to go about getting that?
Yes, so Prop 68 is the park improvement grant, which actually was submitted before I got here, and it's already basically been approved. There is a local match of about $40,000, and with a minimum project, I believe the grant is 177, and the total project then would be around 220, 230. Is that right, Catherine? About, and so that's basically been approved as long as we identify a project by the time, before the end of this calendar year, and submit that, and it's approved. So that's, as long as we do that, it's already been granted. The Measure WW is a reimbursement for the community center, and we have until December of this calendar year to submit additional paperwork to documentation to get that reimbursement. And as long as we do that, we're pretty confident that we're going to get those funds. And then the COPS grant, we typically have budgeted around $100,000 a year, which is what a lot of other public agencies do. However, this particular district has consistently brought in closer to like 140 or 150 in that range. And so we thought this year we would project a little bit more than the typical 100,000, since there's been, but at the same time, not, the full amount that we've been seeing. So kind of being fiscally conservative.
The Prop 68, so we have to identify a project, we have to spend money, or just identify it?
We have to identify a project that is an approved project under the state guidelines, Prop 68 guidelines, yeah.
And is that money for the spend on the project in the budget?
Yes. Yes.
But we haven't identified that yet. We're just assuming we're going to spend it.
Yes, that.
I'm assuming that, I'm assuming the board would like to, capitalize on the grant, since we've already been awarded it. We just have to identify a project. So, if you don't want to do that, we certainly don't have to.
No, I'm just trying to get the parameters of it. Great.
Right.
Okay, really small thing. You talked about the tennis court back, the hitting back board for the tennis court. The old tennis teacher reached out to me, and he thought that the windscreen might need to be replaced as well. So you might want to look at that. It's that green fabric that goes on the back. It's actually, next to the backboard. Just so you might look at that. I like these easy ones. The storm drain repair. How are you going to determine who owns the storm drain or who's responsible for it? Because that's been going on for years, right?
Yep. Yes, it has. So one thing is I have to engage the public works at the county level, but I also think I really need to reach out and meet with the county administrator, because there's a lot of, let's just say, a disjointed kind of relationship between the district and the county. So I'd like to go right to the top and start with a laundry list. We have like other things on our list we'd like to address in addition to that, but also going to Public Works and working with them to figure out exactly the jurisdiction. And then of course, if the board does approve the survey of the perimeter, that would be the legally binding document that would delineate whether or not we own it or Public Works. But I haven't had a chance to engage Public Works to see if they already have that kind of documentation. So, you know, I need to start those conversations, but we need to do something because it needs to be addressed long-term.
It's not a matter of who owns the land. It's a matter of whether the county is responsible for the maintenance of the storm drain. It's not an issue of land ownership. So
that means the survey. So the survey wouldn't necessarily answer the question.
That's right.
Regardless, though, there's more due diligence, and I understand that, and I know that I'm going to take that action
to
figure out how to resolve the problem.
Okay. Let's see. I know, you know, we own the annex and the community center, but we also own Building E. And what's the state of that? I didn't see any budget in there for repairs of Building E, or even an assessment of what the building needs.
I didn't include that because the way the KCC agreement is written currently, any kind of repairs or improvements are their responsibility. And in talking to them, they think they've addressed everything in the building. But if the board would like to allocate funds, we can certainly look at that as part of the KCC negotiations and do our own evaluation.
Well, that brings me to my next point is that, you know, we own the building. So I think we should be the ones determining what it needs and what gets fixed. So I would suggest scrapping that agreement and just charging them rent, and then making that rent enough to pay for any repairs that we need. Because right now it's kind of a backwards agreement where we depend on them to determine what our building needs, and we depend on them to fix our building, but we own the building. We need to take care of it. So I would suggest this year, if you're talking about renegotiating the KCC contract, reverse that. We own the building, we'll take care of it, and just figure out what an appropriate rent would be to cover those costs.
Okay, that sounds
that's
sounds like
my
a great
suggestion,
idea.
But all right. I'm assuming that I didn't listen to the whole meeting last night, but I'm assuming we've not received an official response from the KFPD about our 1,200 square foot, you know, I guess you could call it offer, that we would accept that as sufficient space in the current public safety building. I know their general manager wrote in a letter, but the general manager, of course, can't decide or speak for the board. He can only give his opinion. So has the board, in your knowledge, even responded to our letter saying yes or no, or are they just ignoring it? What's the status?
No, there hasn't been anything other than the letter that all of you received, but my understanding from the general manager is he was directed to write that letter with their knowledge. And so,
well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, if you want a letter directly from the board themselves, I mean, you know, you asked me, the board, to write a letter. I did that. He got his own direction from his own board to respond in the letter that I forwarded. Actually, he sent to all of you directly. So if the board would like me to ask for something more directly from the board members, I can certainly try to do that.
Well, because they didn't have a meeting as far as I know, so I'm not sure how we could get direction from their board. That would be a Brown Act violation. So I would prefer an answer from the board itself, not from the general manager, who may or may not speak for the majority of the members. But that's my preference, because right now it still seems it's just out there and it's being ignored by the board proper. But
this item is probably a little afield from the budget. I guess it has budget implications. So let's...
Well, the budget implications, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's why. And could you go show the org chart on the screen? Would that be okay?
Sure. Catherine, can you do that?
Okay. Sorry, just take me a minute.
Great.
Well, I'm sorry.
Well, it was great. Oh, you're going to get through. Okay.
There we go.
Go
Sorry.
back.
There you go.
So could you explain the difference between the finance director and the senior accountant?
Well, the finance director is acting like a department head, leading a lot of helping to implement a lot of the policy related work of the board, and the senior accountant is doing accounts payable and receivable and payroll, which is what we have, one person doing part-time. And in addition, we have Mays doing some of our monthly financial reports. So this person would now do those in preparation for the board meeting. There's a lot of reporting that's done that needs to be done at a finance director level, which Catherine currently does a fair amount of reporting to various entities, other public agencies related to any of our finances, SDRMA. A lot of that kind of higher level work is done by the finance director, and the senior accountant does more sort of the meat and potatoes, if you will, nuts and bolts, like I just mentioned, of managing those aspects and that are much more like task-oriented aspects of finance for the district.
Right. It just, I'm not questioning anybody's work, but it seems we've got a general manager, an office manager, and a finance director, 3 managers, and 1 person doing work. So it seems like it's top-heavy, that structure. That's my comment on that. And if I go to the police, it also seems a little top-heavy, and this is a sort of a more specific suggestion. We don't, obviously you've said we don't know what it's going to cost to relocate, where we're going to be. We know it's going to cost money, we just don't know how much. And so I would propose, well, I don't think we need a lieutenant position in the first place, but given that we don't know how much we're going to have to spend, I would propose just deferring the lieutenant position, get rid of the captain, don't add a lieutenant position, just have a couple of sergeants and officers, and keep that structure until we know better what we're going to have to be spending on our public safety building. And also, we're going to have a board workshop that maybe better will define what we want from the police department, how many managers, how many actual people out on patrol do we want, and so that seems to me top heavy, especially given that we don't know what our expense is going to be, and we've never had a lieutenant before. In fact, we never really, our captain was just more of a placeholder. Ricky was the captain, but before Ricky, we never had a captain either. So that would be my my preference, and that's what I would want in the budget. So I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you. And Director Natoli?
I just had a comment, and I certainly appreciate all the work that you, Marty, and you, Catherine, put into this, and appreciate the time going over it with me earlier. But as for the cars, when Chief Schuld proposed getting 6 cars last year, both Director Sherris-Watt and I objected. With 6 cars in 1 year. We hadn't had a vehicle replacement policy before, and we wanted to stagger. But also we didn't want to be dollar-wise and penny foolish. And we are getting 1 car, and I'm happy for that. But what we had asked Chief Schuld to do was to identify what the potential cost would be for maintenance, and if it made sense to get the 2 cars 6 months later to do that. So now we're a year later, and if it makes more sense to get 2 cars rather than 1, I'd rather do that and avoid some of the maintenance costs. And as you pointed out, there's also labor costs involved in shuttling these cars around. So I will defer to your judgment, but I just wanted to make that point that it may be better to get the 2 cars now.
Director Sherris-Watt.
Oh, thank you so much, Marty and Catherine. This is terrific. And thank you, Chief Gankaz. Yay, on a car plan. 6 years I've wanted a car plan and we got one. And it's beautiful. So thank you. I slightly disagree with Director Natoli, right? Vice President Natoli. Just, I guess, in the interest, because everything is so fluid, I might want to focus on one car now. But I love the idea that we're going to be replacing, you know, kind of 2 cars each on off years. And I think the cars are absolutely something, and some of these other expenses, I would really like to revisit at mid-year, and hopefully we can put more money to, because things have settled down and we're having more revenue and we're kind of back to a more regular schedule. Thank you for including the crossing guard. I know Marty had asked about that, and you know, Marty, after we got off the phone, I had to drive somewhere. The general manager had asked me if she thought that we would need to keep the crossing guard this coming year, and we were kind of unsure. And on the Arlington, for the first time ever, 3 cars ran the red light in front of me. And I thought, people have forgotten how to drive. So I think that maybe I'm in favor of it for this year. And lots of sympathy to our officers who are dealing with these people who have forgotten how to drive. So one question for Catherine. Catherine, did category 601 go into 802? I'm just, and it might be my tiredness that I'm not seeing where the custodial expenses went.
So for this year's budget, the custodian is not, the custodian's never been an employee and has always been budgeted in an employee category. So since that custodian is a independent contractor, his time is dispersed throughout a few of the accounts, but in the park maintenance and in the community center account.
Okay.
So that he's still there. His time is there. It's just, it's not up an employee, because that's kind of misleading.
Yeah.
It's not an actual employee.
Okay,
So
that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure it was included. And are we upping, he's now going to transfer to more often because of COVID? We're opening the building, or maybe that's a decision later. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because we had talked about that previously, that he would then be needed more frequently. Okay, great. Thank you very much. This is wonderful. And I look forward to hearing a little bit more. I think everyone will want to hear a little bit more about the OPEB decision, but that's just of interest either to the community, I imagine.
I want to also just provide a little context on the crossing guard issue, because I also explored that quite a bit and got some history on that, because I know that that's something the district has picked up in the last few years, but in fact, it had been a district item quite some time ago, and it was only under, can't remember the superintendent's name, Harder, when there was somehow extra money, or he was throwing it around to different places, that it paid for the crossing guard. It had actually been something that the PTA brought to the district, actually when Judy Sanders was president of the PTA, which means it was probably more than 15 years ago, based on public safety concerns and needs. So that has been a long-term item that the district has taken. So just a little bit of history on that. And I also wanted to say on the Parks and Rec, Marty, I see that you're overseeing the contractors, and that the new combined clerk and office manager would also be dealing with some scheduling things. I guess one question is, I know you've talked about looking at some automated scheduling programs. That's still on the agenda for going forward.
Yes, it is. We're still researching it.
I also just want to make a note that the park needs, regular walkthroughs to see what needs to be done. And so to the extent that I know that Fernando does do that to some extent, and Bill, may also do that, but I would like to make that really explicit as part of what they do. And in fact, the KCC program director should be really on top of that. And if you're going to be overseeing the contractors, then maybe that's something that just as a routine once a week. If we're not assigning a park administrator per se, I just want to keep that top of mind, because it really does require some dedicated, eyes on it all the time. All right, I'm gonna go to the public next. So give me a second to get there.
I have a quick question, actually, for Director Sheriff Watt. Do you want to mention anything about the item on the list related to the alarm? I mean,
oh yeah, I was wondering, considering the alarm, my hesitancy about approving the alarm. I liked all of your expenses for the improvements for the community center. The one I wondered about was the alarm, because I'm worried that we will impede the flow of community groups in there, and that we will cause a lot of extra legwork for the KPD trying to improve, to answer people going there to pick up, a scout badge or a fishing, fly fishers or the ham radio operators. They'll have gone in. And so I'm not sure how you would want to work that with the code and when it's turned on and that kind of thing. So I'm wondering about delaying that. I like the idea of cameras because I know we've had some vandalism.
I would agree with that too, just as taking an incremental approach, and seeing how a new key system works, and maybe delaying that, or postponing that as well. I would agree with that. Okay, I'm going to go to the participants, attendees rather. Okay. The first person, oh, I know what else. Another thing I was going to mention, actually, sorry, Marty, was the $2,000 that we approved last year for the KIC's kiosk. And that was approved last year. It was not spent. And I wasn't sure if it was in the budget. I thought when I saw the financials this month, actually, and Catherine may or may not know this, there was something around like administration communication for $2,000 and something. And I just wondered if that might not be where that $2,000 was, but I don't know if it was set aside in any way, Catherine, from last year, and how we would just make a note of that going forward.
It was set aside. However, I don't know that it's now included in this budget. So we may have to revise that and make sure it's included, unless we decide to do it within the next 30 days or 20 days before the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. Well, I see Lisa Corona here, so we'll ask her. She may know, and she's not first to talk though, but we'll get to that. Just wanted to raise that because I know it was brought to our attention by Sarah Paul. Okay, the first person here is Candy Capagrossi, and Candy, you should be able to speak now.
Yes, I unmuted myself. Yes, thank you. I have just 3 brief questions. Regarding the automobile that's being leased for 12 plus a year, you may have mentioned this and I missed it, but who is that vehicle for and why are we leasing rather than buying? And then I have 2 other brief questions.
So I can answer the question if that's okay. Those are the 3 new police vehicles, the new hybrid police vehicles, and it's a government lease program. It's 1.75% interest. And at the end of the term, the 5-year term, we own the vehicles for $1. So it really is more like you're purchasing it, but it's specifically for governments. And it actually protects the government. So if you had to default on the vehicles, you wouldn't pay anything. You just would stop. Like if a city went bankrupt, they could just stop paying on the vehicles. So it's really for the favor of the government.
Good, that makes sense. My next question is on the 20-hour positions. I'm assuming that the benefits will be prorated to part-time.
So
like the person, like for example, a clerk or someone who was 20 hours, that they would not be getting full-time health benefits. Their cost would be prorated to the number of hours they're serving.
I think
So
she's referring to the percentages that are assigned to the funds, I think.
There would be no benefits for part-time employees. Only full-time employees would have benefits.
Okay. And the last question is, I think I know the answer to this, but on the sprinkler system, you're going to be getting bids?
Yes, we need to get we got initial just to build the budget, but we would have to go out when it's time to purchase to go out and get at least 3 bids for all those items on the list.
Okay, and last question, I want to respell my name for the 3rd time. It's Capo Grossi, CAPOGROSSI. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's CAPO. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Hold on one second. Okay. The next person to speak would be Director Padian. Kevin Padian. You should be able to speak, Kevin.
Thank you, Sylvia. I appreciate this. Marty and Catherine, amazing job on this very complex budget you've inherited. Thank you so much for doing this. I have just 2 things I hope will help and a question. To answer Director Deppy's question, yes, the fire board did consider last night at the fire board meeting, which no director attended from here, the letter that Marty sent on behalf of the directors. And Director Stein brought it up and thought that maybe it should have been agendized. But the rest of us could find no action there that said that it wanted to be put on the agenda or dealt with to rescind the vote that we had taken about trying to figure out future plans for the public safety building. And what seemed very strange is that the request for the fire board to rescind its decision was never made by a public action of the board, your board. And so I didn't understand where this was coming from. And I could not deal with this because it could not have been done in private without violating the Brown Act, which I know you didn't do. And so the idea that the board had asked her to do this is like, who's the board? It would not have been a majority of the board because you didn't vote on this. So I had a problem with that to begin with. The second thing is Director Deppy suggested that the chief should not have a lieutenant, but just sergeants. And I called to your attention, I think most of you understand that 3 senior officers have left the force quite recently. It's understaffed, and it's staffed with people who don't have the experience of the people who left in many ways. And I don't understand why a civilian board member would try to tell the chief how to staff his department. I believe that the chief should be totally supported. And if you have a question, you should ask the chief before a board meeting about why he prefers to staff something one way or another. But I believe the chief should be supported. The third thing is I have a question from Marty, and thank you for everything on this, but on your budget, and maybe the chief can answer this, I don't want to put anybody on the spot. You had a police services specialist at halftime for $41K. The position is being eliminated. Is that a sworn position? Does that, I had the, maybe I'm mistaken. I thought maybe that person handled evidence. And I just was curious about how that position would be replaced.
Position, sorry.
Please go. No, I'm done. I don't mean to. It's probably an ignorant question. I just wanted to know.
Well, the chief can chime in too, but that position is not a sworn position. And as he has schooled me, and my own experience tells me, the evidence is never secured and managed by a sworn officer. You don't want sworn officers managing evidence. So it is a non-sworn position. And then in addition to that, that is a part-time position, and the function would take place in the office manager / clerk of the board proposed position. And when we finally, if the board approves the budget, I have to come back with a job description. And I want to acknowledge that we may, in our process as we prepare the job description, think, oh, maybe the title should be a little different than what it is today. But ultimately, the thought is the functions of evidence and this non-sworn position would be combined with the clerk of the board position and some part-time answering the phones in the lobby, basically, and then the scheduling for rentals. And then anything related to the park and managing contractors and capital projects would remain under the general manager and not under that office manager position. Does that help answer?
Yeah, that's terrific. Yeah, thank you. I didn't want anybody to lose their jobs.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the next participant, next attendee who's got their hand up, and that is Julie Stein. Julie, you should be able to talk.
Thank you, Sylvia. So first of all, I just want to, as a resident, direct my my thanks to General Manager Brown, your finance staff, and your police chief for the presentation on the budget tonight. I appreciate that I can imagine the detailed underpinnings of this budget, but I do appreciate that you have condensed it programmatically and presented it to the public in a way that's meaningful to help us actually understand the goals of your agency, your district, and what you're trying to accomplish. And then my second comment is, I want to clarify that I'm speaking as an individual and not on behalf of the fire board. I heard General Manager Brown, I heard your comment that the general manager of the fire district was directed by the board to respond to you. And maybe the simplest thing is to just simply cite the facts, which I think Director Deppie sort of implied. Your letter to the fire district was dated May 19th. The general manager of the fire district wrote you back on May 20th. So it's literally impossible that the fire district board of directors had a meeting to authorize the general manager to respond to you. I did read the first paragraph of your letter at the meeting last night because it was not published in our packet. Neither your letter nor the fire district's general manager's letter was published in the packet. So I did ask that both letters be published on the fire district's website because I think they were both substantive enough and related enough to the budget of the public safety building that the public should have privy to the contents of both letters. And I think it would be great if your board could do the same. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have one more person in the audience here. Hold on one moment. And that is Lisa Corona. Lisa, you should be able to speak now.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Sylvia. I just want to echo, I thought that the budget presentation and organization was really clear and intelligible and looked at multi-year numbers, and I thought it was extremely well done. So thank you to the general manager for that. Sylvia, just wanted to first start by saying that yes, the kiosk at Calusa Circle is still on the table at the Kensington Improvement Club. Between COVID and the architect having some illness issues, it's been delayed for sure. But the last that Sarah Paul reported to us was that, he's still extremely interested in moving forward with that project. And we would definitely appreciate that $2,000 being carried over into this year so we can accomplish that. So that's the goal. Also, I just wanted to comment briefly. I know that the general manager Brown mentioned about the rental rates for the community center, that KCC would be exempt from paying for that. I just wanted to bring up, since it was mentioned, that there are other K groups, Kensington Improvement Club, KPOA, KMAC, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, you know, who meet, I think, mostly once a month, maybe more frequently for some of the youth groups. And it didn't appear that accommodations were being made for those groups to use the community center rent-free, as it were. I just wanted to speak for KIC and say that in 1984, we contributed mightily to the addition of the small rooms, and recently, $15,000 for the community center. And we have cupboards that we've used and paid for in 1984 that we used. So consideration of how K groups would be handled when you get to that item in the rental agreement, I think would be extremely, extremely helpful. And lastly, I just wanted to say that the next public workshop on the budget, which is on the 17th, I believe, was stated at 6 o'clock. It would be so helpful for this recording to be put up quickly on the website so that people can actually refer to the discussion and come in with some background and knowledge as they move forward in that discussion as well. So that would be very much appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you. And I might just say that it might be possible, Marty, to just put up as part of the June 17th item on our website about the budget presentation. You may have, for example, the PowerPoint up there in advance. And if you did put up this recording for the meeting, you certainly could refer to the whole meeting, but it might be possible for someone to just trim the section of the meeting that dealt with the budget and put that up as a separate recording. I know that it's kind of unusual, but it's just an idea. But it's great that people can find it even if that's not the case. So it's only a week, so it's not a lot of time. I'm going to disable talking for, and Del, you should be able to speak next. You have to unmute yourself, but you have the power to talk. There you go.
Well, I've almost finished my speech now. Sorry about that. I wanted to thank you. The slides were excellent and you expanded upon them really nicely. I have a few general comments that I hope will be okay tonight. The new auditor moved the restricted Bayview Fund to the unassigned general fund, where it can be used for any purpose. But someone said that although it is no longer classified as restricted, it is accounted for. So I guess that's basically separate but equal. The 2018-19 audit showed the fund at $195,000, which means that about $250,000 was transferred. Will this remain in the unassigned general fund, or will it be moved to the new waste management fund, which would then be over $300,000? I do hope the franchise fee money will be spent when justified. 2 years ago, the district purchased trash cans for the Arlington and Colusa shopping area with a feature that makes it easier for Bayview to service them. The total cost of over $10,000 was charged to Parks and Rec, although the cans had nothing to do with the park, but everything to do with the exercise of the franchise. Doing something about the park cans was approved at the same time, but nothing happened. So I hope the park cans will be refurbished or replaced, but I don't see the cost in the detailed budget and waste management as proposed. It is projected that Kensington residents will pay $3.4 million in property and special taxes for district operations next year, and will pay another $1.4 million to Bayview for district solid waste program. Under planning for the future, you said, consider new agreements, e.g. Bayview, but if there is no there are no plans to do anything for the new contract in 2023 until next fiscal year, that will be pushing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and there are a few more hands I know are up. Bill Hansel, you should go ahead and be able to speak.
Thank you. As Bill Hansel, General Manager of the Kensington Fire Protection District. Just in addressing the letter issue, the letter originally from the 19th was written from general manager to general manager. It actually specifically addressed me, asking me to respond. If you read the letter again, I did respond the next day after consulting on this issue with the president, vice president, and so my response is reflective of at least that contingent of leadership. I try to. I'd suggest maybe in the future that for policy items that the best communication route would be president to president, and for operations and functions, it would be more general manager to general manager. The letter was also, the original letter was CC'd to all of the all the directors of both boards. So at that point, it was a public letter, and I responded in kind. Since that precedent had been set. I tried to explain in terms of the action that the directing back to the fact sheet that we had produced since the original action was taken, because it seemed that the letter really kind of disregarded or didn't acknowledge all of the consideration and discussion and extensive thought that went into the our director's decision. And the feeling was that the decision had been made and there was extensive backup as to why, and also invitations to collaborate on future solutions. I'd also say that the recording of last night's meeting, for those who want to listen to the discussion last night, is on our website already. And I also did post at Director Stein's request both letters, which are under the public safety buildings portion of our website that also has the fact sheet and all of the extensive background information. So anyway, I hope that helps, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, one last look. There are no more participants who are attendees who have raised their hand. So I think we are going to be getting ready to close this item. I guess I want to make sure that General Manager Brown and Catherine Korsak, do you feel that you have is anything not clear to you? Is there any more direction or clarity you want from the board at this time?
Well, there one comment I think that I heard from Director Deppy, and I didn't hear it echoed. So unless there's an echoing that coalesces into a majority of change the org chart and change, kind of the whole proposed staffing model, I wasn't going to change that. So I guess I just want a sense of where everybody else is on that, because I don't want, I heard one person say it, I didn't hear 3 other board members say it. So I'm not going to run off and make a wholesale change unless I hear more of that from the rest of the board. I'll just, and I'm going to take this opportunity, Director Deputy, just say, a lot of thought went into what we proposed. I know from working with police, for example, having a second manager who's not in a union is really important, especially in such a small department when you do internal affairs investigations and other confidential conversations that you really shouldn't be having with, a POA union member, and yet needs to be happening with a sworn officer and not, necessarily your general manager. So there's a lot of additional help like that is needed. In addition to that, the chief doesn't have an executive assistant like every other chief in Contra Costa County does. So, the lieutenant does do some administrative tasks to support the chief of police. So I would just say, and like the rest of us, we're all doing different pieces of what an executive assistant would do to support a chief of police. So I just want to make that plug, if I could, for the lieutenant. And as for the administrative structure, I think the other thing is that I'm finding you know, having a whole bunch of hourly people when there's so much actual work to be done. And it would be nice to have salaried people that have a job to do, and they do what they need to do to get their job done the way I'm accustomed to doing my job, although, you know, I'm in a position that it's not like that. And the way the chief is, he's in that position where he has a job to do. He just knows that. And if it, you know, goes past, you know, goes to 4:35, it doesn't matter because he's a salary paid employee and he's a police chief. And when you're such a small team, to be able to have a team that can pull together and do those extra tasks if they go over your time limit is really helpful. It's really, it you know, really can make the difference in being a good cohesive team that supports each other and supports the public and the board in getting things done in a team spirit, kind of team effort way, instead of a part-time hourly mindset. So that was part of the logic behind it, Director Deppie. And I think that it could go a long way for providing consistency and continuity to the district and the organization.
Okay. I also just want to say that I appreciated the savings that were part of this plan. And I, in the past, had also had concerns about sort of a top-heavy model. And I see that this is still cheaper and less top-heavy than we've been in the past. And where, you know, there's been a pulling together of both the administrative side and the police side to come together and combine things and streamline. So I'm appreciative of that and willing to give this a try for that reason. Director Sherris-Watt, your hand's up.
Yes, I also want to reinforce President Hassai's comments. I think it's helpful to know the history that not so many years ago, we had a very top-heavy structure that citizens were really frustrated about how services were administered and how tax dollars were spent. And so I think Director Deppie is remembering that time as I do. We also had a tradition of having a discussion about staffing while also knowing that it's up to the chief. So I think that he is coming to this discussion with that spirit, not with a, we don't think you know your job or how you work on your management. It's that tradition where if Carl Kruger isn't here to tell us what we should mind our own business and then argue about our legal fees, I am disappointed, but hopefully he'll be here the 17th. So I think that's the condition. And it's not anything, we are very appreciative of the work of our general manager and chief of police. And I appreciate, Marty, your comments about needing a sworn, but not a POA member to have discussions with.
Yeah.
Since we don't have an HR department. Currently, we have to outsource.
Okay. General Manager Brown, is your hand up?
Yes, it is. I just wanted to quickly also point out that in the staff proposal for next year, the finance director position would continue to stay at 20 hours a week, and the general manager's position would continue to stay at 30 hours a week. So those are two positions that would not be full-time manager positions.
Okay. All right, with that, we're going to close out the discussion on the budget and move to the next presentation, which is going to be given to us by Chief of Police Mike Gankaz around traffic and safety. So Chief Gankaz, take it away.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Board of Directors. We're having some technical difficulties here in the department. We had IT over here today, and I learned the hard way that if I put this presentation up with the video, it's going to start sputtering. So I'm going to shut my video off to operate the PowerPoint just briefly. Hopefully it'll be pretty seamless here. So please just bear with me. Can everyone see that? Okay, fantastic. Well, let's get going. I'm going to give you a brief overview of our proposed comprehensive traffic safety program. And this is not just a program for the next couple of months, but we're trying to build a program for the next few years and for the future chief of police in 5 years. So traffic safety programs form an integral component of an effective, comprehensive law enforcement operation. Many successful safety initiatives have resulted not only in reductions in collisions, but in additional positive results that benefit our community in many areas. There are many approaches to traffic safety presently taken by law enforcement in the United States. As the Kensington Police Department continues its restructuring and rebranding, we will move to adopt effective, proven strategies combined with emerging trends and new technology. This process will be of the utmost importance. The type of strategy employed will provide positive results and ensure success both in the short and the long term of our community. All right, let's discuss the three key areas of progress the Kensington Police Department will employ to ensure long-term success. One is organizational change, and that includes employee ownership and culture adjustment. Two, strategic planning. We must be flexible with our program and have the ability to address many needs and change at any time. We want to do this without compromising the mission of comprehensive traffic safety, meaning not deploy all of our resources in one area for any one given reason. And three, measuring our progress. We want to see what we're doing. And the goal is to reduce traffic violations, reduce accidents, and make the roadways safer. Organizational priority. Number one, we have to increase employee ownership. We're going to give them the why mission, and our command staff will instill in our officers that we take pride in service and how we treat our citizens and stakeholders in the community. Traffic safety is a core responsibility of our organization. Our efforts are at the forefront of saving lives and creating safe roadways. We are enthusiastic about our mission to save lives and keep people safe on the Kensington streets. Two, aligned values. And this starts with the field training officer, the sergeant, and the lieutenant. Our command staff will echo the same message from the moment a new officer and employee is brought on board. It starts with the FTO, who instills the mission of traffic safety from day one. A values-based leadership program creates commonality among all employees, management or otherwise. With an aligned set of values, employees work better together and achieve goals faster. Constant communication. We're instituting a new technology and mediums of communicating amongst our officers. One of them, the general manager spoke about in her budget presentation. It's called Net Presenter. This contemporary form of communication is meant to speak to the next generation of officer who is used to receiving and retaining information on their smartphones. Regularly updated messages about patrol requirements, traffic hotspots, and peak times of day for enforcement and extra patrol will be broadcast in this form. The patrol lieutenant is responsible for overseeing this program. This form of messaging and constant communication is proving valuable and successful in law enforcement. Collaboration and process improvements. We look to our public and our own employees for suggestions on innovative ways of being more productive and helpful in the community. We're working with several partners to find what is working for them and apply that to our needs. We're closely aligned with the IACP, which is the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and the NHTSA, which is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and the methods that they recommend for traffic safety and enforcement, which we will employ. One method we see as becoming valuable are the traffic signs that were recently installed. Data from these signs appears to be very useful and efficient in that we can strategically deploy traffic resources during peak violation hours. We're going to institute recognition for work. We are developing a quarterly recognition luncheon informally at the police department. At each of these quarterly meetings, we will recognize outstanding efforts of those officers who provided exceptional work in improving traffic safety in Kensington. This type of employee recognition and engagement does a few things. It lowers employee turnover. It creates branding ambassadors for the organization. It improves department productivity, and it increases community awareness. Next slide. Strategic planning process. We're going to set the stage. Our goal is to have the traffic enforcement unit on patrol at least 10 hours a day. I want to set that right off the start. We plan on having that specific traffic unit with 2 officers working 12-hour shifts, at least 5 hours between each officer on the peak hours. Our primary goal is public safety. Our message our message is the traffic enforcement unit will be enforcing a variety of California vehicle codes, including pedestrian and bicycle violations. We're going to deploy a traffic enforcement car on July 1st. At present, we're obtaining quotes to convert one of the patrol vehicles into a traffic enforcement unit equipped with technology to increase awareness and enforcement. We're going to create universal traffic enforcement training. The department will mandatorily enroll each officer in basic and advanced post-traffic investigation and safety courses. We're going to include modern equipment and evidence collection in this particular car, including a WatchGuard in-car camera system and in-car radar system. So the officer can conduct radar surveys without getting out of his car and standing on the side of the road like you may see some highway patrol officers doing on the freeway, holding a radar gun. We're going to optimize our scheduling for effectiveness. We're using electronic scheduling and data from traffic signs to direct officers to specific locations during peak enforcement times. Our goal is public safety and an educational campaign as well. We'll provide educational information to everyone contacted for a violation, whether it be in the form of a warning, an informational pamphlet, or a website link they can visit for information about traffic safety. And we're going to measure how we're doing. So what that means is the supervisor, the lieutenant, is going to review each and every citation issued by the officers. They'll approve all cites as well as track officer productivity. The supervisor, who is the lieutenant, will submit weekly reports to the chief of police on the needs of the unit, the progress, and challenges. The supervisor will also review and evaluate traffic data from those traffic signs, including citizen complaints and requests for extra patrol. The scheduling lieutenant will deploy the resources that he has accordingly. So that's how we're going to do that and measure our progress. The police department is also working on a platform to provide more detail about traffic safety in Kensington. The data will include trends, enforcement campaigns, and NHTSA data and helpful links. Our traffic program will be highlighted in the police department's end of the year reports. So our keys to success in 2021. We're going to integrate traffic safety throughout all operations in the department, i.e. the traffic safety unit. We're going to ensure adequate training and equipment and staff are ready to fulfill the responsibility of providing traffic safety. We're going to be creative in what we do. We're going to seek an agreement with labor on the importance of including traffic-related items in the promotional process. And we are right now in the stages of soliciting applications for field training officer. And one of the things that the assessors are going to be looking for is how well that officer understands the traffic laws and the mission of the Kensington Police Department and enforcing them. And lastly, we're going to work with the community to provide educational campaign, community outreach, and innovative technology through the Office of Traffic Safety. And one last slide I wanted to throw in there, just so you can see what I'm speaking about and how we're going to collect this data. What you're looking at on the screen is data that was obtained from one of the traffic signs in the community. And although it looks jumbled, I'll go over these arrows for you if I could, and what they mean and what they're showing. If you look at the blue arrow on the right, you're looking at a vehicle count from one of those signs. It flashes 25, and then it'll tell you to slow down. You may have seen them. Well, this particular sign took data for 1 week and logged 4,726 cars. The yellow arrow that you see there shows the percent of violators at 5 miles an hour. That's 11.1%. As the speed, as you see the 10 mile per hour average decreases to 1.5. That means the motorists who see the sign flashing at 25 miles an hour immediately decrease their speed. The percent of violators who continue above 10 miles per hour and don't slow down are less than that, less than 2%, 0.20%. The green arrow shows the percent of violators at peak times at 5 miles per hour, which is in the 5 mile per hour range above 25, and that's 29%. Above 10 miles per hour is 5.6%, and even less at 15 miles per hour. The average mile per hour of the cars, of 4,726 cars that this sign detected, was 23.6 miles per hour. The peak speed you'll see is 65. So yeah, it's odd to believe that somebody would be going 65 miles per hour in a 25, but it does happen. And those are the guys we're looking for. Underneath, you'll see another statistic there, non-speeder average. Non-speeders at peak time, they're 2,572 numbers of non-speeders and 1,552 non-speeders in the peak hours. So this is the data that we look at, and off to the left over there in the red, you'll see I highlighted the times of the number of violators and the percent of people committing those violations. Although it does show the average speed, 25, 26, 25, 25, 25, we can determine that the most violations are occurring at that sign between 1 and 5:30 in the afternoon. And by looking at this data, by analyzing it in the top circle, our patrol lieutenant will deploy the resources accordingly, initiate a sustained campaign, analyze the data after the fact, report the results, and that's how the circle goes. So unless the data is analyzed, until the data is analyzed, we can't deploy the resources collectively. But this is how we're going to use some of this new technology in this city for directed patrols and efficiency. I hope that didn't confuse too many of you, and that will conclude my presentation.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
I want to open it up to the board members, and I see Director Sheris Watt first. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Chief Gankaz. And I just wanted to compliment you. For folks that don't know, already he's implementing traffic safety. They were already an officer at Hilltop's 6th grade graduation occurred last week, and it was a car graduation. So there were all kinds of vehicles on the school blacktop, and I saw our officers were there. So thank you so much.
Director Deppy.
Yes, thank you very much, Chief Gankaz. And as you can imagine, I think this is great. We've done a lot of work. I know and Officer Harms has also been behind the scenes doing a lot of work, so I thank him as well. But this is really what I think, at least what I think most of the board has been looking for a long time, of a sort of a higher level approach to traffic enforcement and traffic safety, not just the one-off, there's a problem here, go look at it. Really a directed effort with measurements and analysis and training. This is really great. And so I can't thank you enough. I do want to say that I hate to go back to a previous agenda item, so it's not really that, but I think if any of us at the board has something to say to you, I don't think there's a problem saying it in public. I think that's where our discussion should be. We shouldn't be having board discussions behind the scenes and come to the meeting with everything agreed upon, because then the public doesn't get to see our deliberations. Maybe I ask a stupid question once in a while, but I think that's part of the process, is that we're having interaction with the general manager and the chief. And I think it should be done as much as possible in public, so the public can see what we're thinking, our deliberations, and the thought process about what goes on. So it's not meant as disrespect. It's just, I feel that it's appropriate to ask questions, and that's why we're a board. We're not just here to rubber stamp things. I think that's our duty, is to ask questions and offer suggestions. And doesn't mean we always get our way or that we're always right, but I think that's important, that we don't shy away from maybe asking questions that people don't like, or and hopefully they're not misconstrued. Anyway, but thank you for this presentation. I think it was great, and I'm looking forward to the results and the reporting. I think that will be really interesting to see.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome, Director Deppy. No offense to the questioning. If you only knew what some people say to me wearing this uniform, you'd know that what you said is just fine.
Vice President Natoli.
I just wanted to thank Chief Gankaz again. This presentation was really terrific and very impressive. And I'm glad that we're starting to get the data out from these signs. Thank you very much.
I will echo that, and I will also give my thanks to Director Deppy, who was a lot behind getting those signs. I think as somebody who appreciates, you know, efficiency, effectiveness, and data and analysis, this was began quite some time ago with the purchase of these signs, but I think we're now really getting the best use out of them, or we're going to start to. I would just like to say that in your work, I just want to, I guess, sort of caution around incentives and around, you know, just making sure that we are not just focused on, you know, I know you're looking at it a holistic approach, and you're not looking at just the numbers of tickets, for example. We want to see a reduction in violations, because that's really to me, prevention is the true success. I raise this only because there was a very interesting article today in the Washington Post about police reform, and it dealt with, you know, the much more serious topics that we are seeing in the news these days. And it started out with the first instance of the term racial profiling, which occurred in New Jersey. And there's a history behind that, the first use of that word, and how that came about, which was a result of a reporter, as he was driving to work, seeing an inordinate number of, you know, African Americans and Latinos pulled over by the police, and began to wonder about that. And I just want to read one little paragraph from that, because I thought, oh, I just lost it now. But it talked about, you know, when you do any kind of reform, you need to have a chief behind it. You need to have the government behind it, the city or town government, and you need to have the officers in the union behind it. And I see right now that we're at that point. I mean, we don't have quite the same issues, perhaps, but, you know, they can lead to those kinds of issues. So I just want to make sure that we're incentivizing the right piece around the promotional, you know, aspect of having traffic safety included, so that we don't incentivize, you know, behavior that ultimately is not productive and positive. So that's just my only word of caution, I guess.
Well taken.
So,
it is well taken, and I absolutely understand where you're coming from. I do very much.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else? Director Nuttall, your hand's up. Is that left over?
Yeah, I just wanted to also thank Chief Gankes for the Nixle alerts on the traffic issues around Kensington. I don't know how you got PG&E and East Bay Mud to actually cooperate with you, but the notices are really terrific of just giving people a heads up when there may be work on some of the streets. So thank you.
You're very welcome. That credit goes to the staff, Officer Tamika Fodor, Acting Lieutenant Brad Harms, and Officer Roy Bang. They deserve all the credit for that. They're the ones pushing those messages out. I'm not so happy about the 1:30 in the morning messages, because I wake up, but that's their game. Thank you.
I have a question about Net Presenter that was mentioned, just because, is it only traffic type stuff that is being communicated through Net Presenter?
No, it's a whole product. You know, the old days of a turnover log in a briefing room where you would look and see, you know, what happened. Mm-hmm. Those days are over with, unless it's transmitted here, or we can transmit it on a television set. We're finding more of the younger generation will retain that information more. So what we put on things, that a television like that, a monitor, would be in the patrol room, and it just scrolls messages. Coffee with a cop. Don't forget traffic enforcement in this area. A catalytic converter was stolen in this neighborhood last night. These are the vacation watch homes. And these are cycled through along with important messages, training tips, updates on case law, things from the district attorney's office, different processes and procedures. And it is more graphically interesting than a simple email that unfortunately goes right into the circular file as soon as some of the officers get to work. So they can't shut it off, basically.
I mean, I sympathize with that, because I experienced this in my own work environment. I was asking mostly because, since these are, I assume, their personal cell phones, I want to make sure that there's no, like, you know, sensitive or private information that could end up staying on a officer's personal cell phone.
Well, no, this information is housed here at the police department, and it'll cycle when your desktop screen goes to screensaver. this program comes up and begins broadcasting these different messages.
Right. So it's just like informational stuff. Got it.
That's all it is. It's a rolling screen, and across the bottom is a scrolling message. It would be whatever we select. KTVU News. There's an accident on Interstate 80. It broadcasts the weather. It's more of an informational thing that is on a screen upstairs, but we dictate the message we want the officers to see.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead to the audience. I see 2 hands up, so give me one moment to get there. Okay. David Bergen, you should go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I just had one question for the chief. Where was the location of the speed sensor that you described the data from?
We have one off, I believe it's Franciscan, and we have one off of the Arlington.
So the one that showed the 65 miles an hour must have been on Franciscan then.
I believe it was, yes.
Yes, Chris.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Larry Nagel, you should go ahead and be able to speak now, Larry.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. I'm Larry Nagel. I'm the president of the Kensington Fire Protection District and a co-chair of the Emergency Preparedness Committee.
You muted yourself, Larry. There you go.
Okay, I'm unmuted now.
Yeah.
So I would like to congratulate Chief Gansas on his new position. It's a challenging job, but I think we've got the right person in the job. And I would like to just congratulate everybody on a great presentation on traffic safety and point out that probably the most important thing we can concentrate on in traffic safety is evacuation procedures, being able to get people out of this town if and when a wildfire comes. And I'd like to put out a special shout out to Officer Harms, who I understand, I think I just heard you call him Acting Lieutenant Harms, so that's a promotion. The police department and the fire department have been working collaboratively for some time now on evacuation routes. And I look forward to continuing collaboration and cooperation. I think we've made great progress. We still have a lot to do. And of course, the biggest responsibility that we all have is making sure that everybody gets out safe and alive in case of a wildfire. So thank you and congratulations, Chief. A very good.
Oops. Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right. So if we're ready to move on from the traffic presentation, we would go on to the next item. Is everyone ready for that? Okay. So this item is the updated master fee schedule for the KPPCSD rental facilities. And we're going to consider approval of this updated master fee schedule. And General Manager Brown is going to be introducing this item. There were 3 attachments in our packet that were the proposed fee schedule, the current fees, as well as an extensive market rate comparison with the communities around us. So General Manager Brown.
Yes, I want to just also mention that we inadvertently left off picnic areas and tennis courts on the proposed schedule, and that was sent to the board separately and also reposted on the website as well. So first of all, I want to say, I know this is a lot of information. And so if the board wants to give direction and have us come back with any kind of revisions that's cleaner, I could completely understand that because it's a lot to digest. But, you know, when talking to district staff, it seemed apparent that It's been at least a decade since the fee structure has been looked at. B, it also seemed like there may be some other opportunities for revenue if the board is inclined and interested at your discretion to consider that other jurisdictions are actually taking advantage of, if you will. Also, the other issues, you know, the community center has been renovated. It's brand new. This is a perfect opportunity to talk about these things just before we open up the community center with, I think, some more interesting opportunities for rentals for people in a beautiful brand new building, well, almost brand new, beautiful building and more opportunity. And then, of course, with the relaxing of COVID-19, social distancing, there has been quite a bit of interest generated around renting the facility. So with that backdrop, I bring you this item. I'm going to jump right into the attachments because I think, you know, that's really where the meat and potatoes are. So attachment 1, as you can see, is mainly focused on the community center and for a rental opportunity. And it's $75 for residents and $100 for non-residents with a 4-hour minimum. I've heard that there is a fee structure for the meeting rooms, but it's not really used. So in most cases, I think with one exception, we haven't really been renting out the meeting rooms in the recent past, is my understanding. So hence the no fee structure really listed on this current rate sheet. So moving to attachment 2, as you can see, we looked at El Cerrito, Albany, Berkeley, and Richmond. You know, there's no perfect apples to apples comparison here, but there are some sort of community center with various amenities that are similar and various picnic areas, and some have tennis courts as well. I'm not going to go down and drill down into every single line item in this attachment, but I think generally I would say, you know, for the community center, rentals are somewhere between $250 an hour down to, I think Berkeley has the least expensive for residents at around $82 an hour. So it's, you know, it's a pretty broad range of fees. And so when we as staff started looking at, you know, a proposal for a fee structure increase, you know, it wasn't a quick, easy, oh, well, let's just do an average or something like that. So some of this is just looking at this and thinking about, this is a new center, what would be a fair amount to possibly ask for. It's not, there's not a science behind it. So I want to just, you know, acknowledge that right up front. So if you jump to attachment 3, you can see here is now a list of a fee structure for the community center with a pretty substantial increase for residents from $75 to $135. Again, this is all proposed. $145 for non-residents. Fees for each of the meeting rooms. The grassy, and then also for additional opportunities for rental that some of the other districts are doing some similar things that we haven't been doing. And again, it's a discretionary consideration is, would we want to, you know, be able to have somebody rent out the grassy round lawn only in front of the community center, or just the amphitheater or the barbecue area next to the community center, and tables and chair rental opportunities. And then, you know, we've got basically potentially 5 picnic areas with barbecues that could also be rented for what we've listed here, $70 for residents and $90 for non-residents all day. And then the tennis courts, a proposed increase of $7 an hour for residents and $10 an hour for non-residents. So that's the kind of high level, broad strokes proposal. And so if you have questions for me, and I want to acknowledge, you know, Andrea DiNapoli's work on this. She, you know, has been doing a lot of managing the rental of the community center in particular. And so she did the legwork on these numbers and comparisons of other jurisdictions. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. I am going to, sorry, I had to look at things. All right, so Director Sheris Watts up first.
Okay. I would have sent these questions to you, and I apologize. It's been so busy getting to the end of school. This is fantastic. We were working on it kind of before, and then and then there seemed no reason when we were renovating. So a couple questions. First, I guess we'll go to the easy ones first. The picnic area and the areas, I assume that you'll move to like a reservation software, that's how we would handle that. Then my question is, are we going to keep barbecues there with fire danger? I mean, I think that's a decision you could make, but I just wondered if we're going to allow people to cook and barbecue in the park. And yeah, and then so and then the other is that, how are we going to handle reinforcement or enforcement if folks come and say they have a reservation? Are we going to ask the PD to handle that on the weekend or something? You know, someone comes and says, hey, I reserved this. I'm assuming, I guess we'll have to post a sign and put up a notice of that someone's reserved it, because otherwise, are we presuming it's just first come, first serve? Let me continue.
So for the barbecue question, I would just seek policy direction from all of you. We didn't consider whether or not that, I've never heard anybody before now mention removing them or not using them. So we didn't make any consideration to that. So I would just seek your direction if that's something the board would like to do. And then the other question is, we envisioned that like on a Friday, we would post some sort of sign to be determined that would be not permanent, but, you know, something that would be sturdy enough that, you know, you can't just walk away and throw it away and say, oh, there's no, you know, nobody's here, right? Something substantial. Part of the reason for doing the all day reservation was so that we could put it out on a Friday and be done with it. We had a conversation about, well, you could do different shifts. And I just seemed like that would be so difficult to manage with staff that aren't there on the weekends. But a Friday afternoon, a staff person can go out and, you know, if there's reservations and picnic areas, put up some, again, signage to be determined. And then the enforcement, you know, if somebody showed up and people didn't want to move or there wasn't signage, sorry, Chief, we haven't discussed this yet, but, you know, I think that the only people that are there on the weekend that could help with that enforcement would be, you know, the police. Hopefully that's like not a path that we would have to go down if we had, you know, signage that is not easy to just walk away and take away. So that's as far as we got with the implementation.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, that makes sense to me to have it all day. And the barbecues were put in without board about 5 years ago. They were just put in by a previous GM. So I think that I will take, you know, what the safety advice.
Well, I'm not going to do that. So if you tell me to remove them, I'm going to remove them. If you tell me to keep them, we're going to keep them.
Have it either way. So we can talk about that later, I guess. Okay. And then moving on to the community center. This is great. My one suggestion is that maybe we have a group plan, because I think when you think about renting out the entire community center, you know, I don't know that maybe there's a way that if you're getting the whole kit and caboodle, I think I priced this out somewhere. I think it's like $12.50, $12.20 for 4 hours or something. And I was thinking maybe we want to, you know, make it $1,100 or $1,200 and you get everything. Because if folks are going to have something, you know, a memorial or a wedding, you don't want somebody in the side room, right? I think we want to probably avoid that. Those metal folding chairs, man, I'd let anybody use them. I don't care about rental. I know specific. Two more things. wondering if we should make this, when we adopt it, a 2-year plan so that you're not forced to come back. Like we only think about revising every 2 years. I know that like El Cerrito says on their website, you know, this all could change every July 1st. And my thought is, why put that burden on you? Let's make the prices so that we're comfortable for, you know, we only handle it on odd years or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing is to touch on what Lisa Corona brought up, that I think we do need some kind of separate discussion or documentation of the history and involvement of K groups and how we handle local nonprofit organizations, excuse me, using the building, you know, monthly or, you know, weekly for an hour or something like that. And I think that because clearly we're not going to probably be renting out, charging the fly fishermen or the ham radio operators. I don't think. That's not my desire as a board member. So otherwise, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, Director Deppie.
Right. Also, yeah, thank you from me. This is really good. It's nice to see it looked at after so long. A couple of questions. I assume the key deposit would go away if we have an electronic keying system.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you're right about that. I think I just kind of left it in there because, you know, the budget's not been approved yet, so we're figuring it out.
Sure. And are those non-copyable keys? Are those the kind that, you know, are special locks and the keys are marked you can't copy, and or there's just regular keys?
Well, what we were hoping to do is more of an electronic system that would use like a thumbprint, what's called biometric. Okay. And so something like that. Because one of the things that's challenging with the staffing levels is, you know, doing this and then who has a key and then somebody gives the key to somebody else because I'm going to be late and, you know, that kind of thing.
No, I just, in the interim, if we do have to have just locks and they're non-copyable keys, I think it's costs more than $125 to rekey the whole place and to get new keys. I think it'd be a lot more expensive than that. I don't know what a standard key deposit is, but that might be too low if someone actually does indeed lose a key. And just in general, you're talking about reservation software. Is the new position that you're creating going to take the reservations for everything, including the tennis courts?
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting because right now KCC actually takes cash, right? It's the only way you can in-person reserve a tennis court. And, you know, it's just not a good system because right now we get, I mean, last week I got an envelope with quarters in it, you know, and then I'm walking off to the district with an envelope that I'm putting in a coin box, and you have all these people handling cash, and, you know, you could have some concerns about chain of custody, right? So we think it would be better. I know KCC, Jenny Parks agrees with me to just move the whole thing to an electronic scheduling and nobody's touching cash anymore. And in that regard, the district would take that on as part of its overall scheduling process. That's what I would.
Yeah, that's what I prefer. That's what I would prefer as well. Yeah, I think it's sort of a one-stop shop to reserve things. Okay.
Right.
And of course, the tennis courts, if it's not reserved, it's free. It's only if you want to reserve it. That's when you pay.
True. Yeah. I mean, if it's a fee, if it's not reserved and it's empty, it's all yours.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You're muted, Sylvia. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm trying to look at my screen with the attachment, so I'm not really looking at you guys right now or Zoom. So just give me a moment to get to my screen. My question was a couple of questions. One was about the fee for alcohol permit, and it says exclusive to ABC for selling. That means that, if I understand what you're saying here, is that's what it costs, but they have to go to the ABC to get it, but that 140 has nothing to do with us.
Well, you know, that's an interesting question, because I had that conversation yesterday, and actually the way it is intended is that we would manage it. And so At an operational level, I would like to remove that from our responsibility. Anywhere else I've ever worked, it is, you say to a person that's having an event that wants liquor, alcohol, yeah, you can do that, but you need to go get a permit from ABC and then they go do it themselves. And this particular proposal here wasn't actually, and I'm glad you brought it up, it wasn't structured that way. It was structured that we would do it. And I don't think that we have the capacity really. So that's something I would want to change. And then the question I think becomes for us is, you go get your ABC license, but does the district want to still charge an additional charge for people that are now serving alcohol, because people are drinking, right? And anything can happen. And so like, yeah, there's insurance, but I think that's an open-ended question that the board, I mean, I've definitely worked in other places where you go get your own ABC license, but you're still going to pay us another additional fee because there's just a open-ended liability when people are, kind of drinking, right? So, but it's a discretionary policy, decision. I would rather we don't apply for ABC licenses.
I'm actually surprised about that, because I had to do an event there and I had to go get the permit. So I've done that. And I personally would not recommend, I would not be happy if I had to go get a permit and pay extra on top of that, because I see that the cleaning deposit is quite large if you have alcohol. So I feel like that's kind of how you get around that. The idea is that when there's alcohol involved, there could be more that happens. And I'd rather just stick to the cleaning deposit, I guess, than the extra fee on a permit. I also believe that when I got the permit, I had to bring it to the district to just show that I had it. I think, I can't remember whether we required them to hand it in or not.
We would want to do that for sure. I would definitely not feel comfortable with just sort of taking, they would have to give us a copy of it that goes in, a file for the entire event with their insurance and everything. But I can see what you're saying, that we make them go get the ABC permit. They give us a photocopy of it for our files, and there's no additional charge beyond the cleaning, hefty cleaning requirement. Yeah.
I mean, it's a deposit, right? And so it depends on whether they fulfill their obligations. I also think that, I certainly would encourage you to also ask some of your counterparts about, or have Bill Driscoll talk to you about what El Cerrito does with some of these things about reservations and how they handle some of these things, just for some practical advice. I also agree with the idea of, what Director Sherris-Watt said about the all day and having good signage, and maybe having a number available. The non-emergency dispatch over the weekend might be the number to say, if there is a problem, call. I don't know. May not want to encourage it too much, but again, if there is no number, then who knows what they're going to do. And on the barbecues, I think my only other question about barbecues is, at one time there was again, these were all done without board input. There was a table that was placed sort of near the far end of the basketball court, kind of next to the bathrooms, and between the bathrooms and the staircase up to the upper lawn. There used to be a table and chairs and a barbecue there. The barbecue is still there. The table was removed. And so it's a weird place. I think there's just kind of, if I recall correctly, it's just like a weird standalone barbecue. And that's one that maybe we would want to think about moving, because it was just kind of weirdly placed there. And of course, obviously on red flag days, we would just follow those rules. I'm okay with them being there. I think I've asked in the past about some of those barbecues and whether they pose a danger. And I think I was told that, if it's not a red flag day, then they should be okay. So I appreciate the work that went into this from both your end and Andrea's end. So please pass that along. And I don't think I have anything else to say. So I'm going to go back to my Zoom view so I can see better. And public comment. Oh, sorry, Director Sherris-Watt first.
Two quick things, sorry. I know that for other municipalities, sometimes they offer janitorial cleanup if folks don't want to do handle the cleanup. I don't know if our contractors would be interested in coming in. I think El Cerrito charges like $250 an hour or something, for maybe it's a bit less. for having someone else do the cleaning for you. I think that's just if Bill Driscoll or whomever is interested in that. The other is temporarily, do we want to add a cleaning fee because of COVID? Do we want to have a special, the fact that maybe we need to wipe down all the chairs if you use them right now?
I actually had Andrea do some research on that in the last couple of weeks, and at the state level and kind of the county, and it's really, there's not much guidance out there, and it's going to be a discretionary decision. There's guidance when you get to mega events that, you know, hundreds of people that we're not going to see at the community center, I don't think. Then there's some guidance around social distancing and cleanup, but there's actually not that much there. And what I wanted to do was share with you in the next biweekly update what that is, which is tomorrow, what guidance there is, because it's honestly, it's not super helpful. And there's not much. If it's groups of 50 to 100 people, there just isn't that much guidance on it. So I think that's a discretionary decision. If the board would like us to do more cleanup, we can certainly do that and build that into the structure. If you're comfortable with following basically the county and state guidelines, then there aren't going to be any new requirements for cleanup, looks like.
I can speak just from what I know, which is that the surface transmission is not really the biggest concern anymore. That's just not where the focus is. It really has been on droplets and maybe some extremely highly public trafficked areas, maybe, but that's not really where the emphasis is. They're actually think it's time to kind of dial that back. So I don't think it's, personally, just from what I know, I don't think it's necessary. But all right, I'm going to just move to the public if I can. Candy Capagrossi, you should be able to go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. When you look at the different categories, whether it's the K clubs or private use, I would like to ask you might consider a third category. I've been talking with some local artists and coming up with the idea of having, when the building opened, having art in the park and having our local Kensington artists be able to show some of their art. And the art tends to be from our area. And the reason for that is that I was looking at the cost that exists. There's also paying for insurance. And then if you get a liquor license, you have to have a nonprofit sponsor it. And I guess the difference would be that it would be an event that's open to the public, not a private, but something that Kensington would be invited to. For example, an art in the park. And so that you might consider some type of fee that would be a community service kind of, and I know Sylvie remembers when we did the fundraiser for Prabesh, you know, when we had art and we had food and different things. And we got a good turnout. And I think it was good for the community too, to have an event like that. So I don't want to charge the artists. I don't necessarily want to charge people to come look at art. So just trying to, if you have any ideas on how we could do community events, there'll have to be fees, but you might give us a little bit of a break if it's open to the residents.
I would suggest getting a nonprofit to sponsor you, like the KIC or the KCC, to just, or even the Friends of the Kensington Library might be willing to do it, and that would help you go under an umbrella of a nonprofit. Okay, that's that. When you were talking about that, I wrote down KIC. I'm going to be making some calls. Thank you very much. Okay. And Lisa Corona. Go ahead, Lisa. You should be able to talk.
Yes, thank you very much. You know, this is the first time I've seen this, and I think, you know, I think it works really well for people who are non-residents. And if there's consideration in the policy direction regarding the K groups or other, you know, like the Public Safety Commission, there are a lot of groups that are local that put on elements at the community center, because it's our only real meeting place, that are really driven to the safety and information and education of the public about the community, about what's going on in the community and about how to keep themselves and their neighbors safe. So I think, you know, that those considerations need to be kind of built into this and be relatively clear. I think, you know, I'm looking at just some of these things in terms of the community center rental. I think there just doesn't seem to be much differential between resident and non-resident numbers in that. And I think there really has to be more consideration for Kensington residents, and for non-residents, I think, yeah, yeah, let's export that funds or import those funds from those folks. So I think that's good. I think on the rooms, the side rooms, when I think about how they're used, sometimes they're used for, you know, an hour or 2 hours for just a monthly meeting. And so I think the 4-hour minimum seems a little bit burdensome, and maybe going down to 2-hour minimum, I think is at least a fair beginning for groups that don't need it for 4 hours, that need a little space to meet.
That's actually what it is, Lisa. The 4-hour minimum is just for the main hall.
Oh, that's all related to the main hall only.
The 2 hour is 2 hours for the side rooms.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing that. Is that on here somewhere?
Am I correct about that's what I thought I saw?
Yeah, you know what? That might be the updated version that has that was changed to 2-hour minimum. I'm sorry about that, Lisa.
Yeah, okay.
So you may be looking at an older version, but because I agree, we realized that was a mistake after it was published on Monday.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense. You know, but I think the thought of our K groups renting it like for an annual meeting that many of us have, you know, to have it cost $1,000 is a little bit steep. So I'd also like to see those policies around the K group for a 1 day a year or something like that for their annual meeting purposes. So, so I'm not looking at the final one, which explains why I had questions about where are the picnic areas. So I'm hoping that you'll hold this over, you know, provide direction, hold this over, and maybe if I saw the completed version with the other policy pieces in it, that would be extremely helpful.
Thank you. That's the last member of the public. So, you know, General Manager Brown herself suggested that maybe we kind of hold this a little bit longer, in particular to maybe give some time for the policy piece that Director Sheriff Watt mentioned around kind of K groups, and given the historical use, and trying to find a way to make sure that is, you know, taken into account. I personally find that this fee schedule really works. I don't know whether we need to really adopt it this time, or you want to hold it off. I wanted to see what other board members think.
I'm happy to work with Marty and chat since I'm, but I think that maybe this could come back as part, not to rush too much, but come back as part of the budget so that it's approved, because I'm imagining that they're already getting requests for people who want space badly. And so if we could come back with a K group proposal and this fine-tuned for the 27th, 29th? When, yeah, for that meeting with along with the budget, I think that would be best. That's my suggestion.
Does that work for everybody? Okay, I see lots of heads nodding. So I think that we are going to be tabling this item until till June 29th with the policy direction to outline a process that relates to you know, certain K groups or K groups, and just fine tunes anything related to this, to the budget, to the fee schedule here.
And I'm happy to chat with Lisa Corona and other K groups representatives as well, so we can kind of fine tune.
Yeah, I think we have to find the right balance between the fact that, you know, there are ongoing costs for us to do this, but of course understanding the value they provide to the community. And it is generally about a once a month meeting for most groups, and then usually a yearly. Not even every group has a yearly, and then not every group has that schedule, but we could find something that I think is fair, that is not too onerous, but does provide some contribution that recognizes that there are ongoing costs. Okay, great. So we've tabled that item till June 29th. And our next item is the levy assessment for the Kensington Park Assessment District. Catherine Corsack will introduce this to us, and basically this relates to our intention to levy and collect the assessment for the Park District for the coming fiscal year.
Yes, so this is the same resolution from last time. We missed the deadline for posting the hearing 10 days prior, so that's why we're bringing it back to you. This resolution, I believe, or the hearing will be posted, I believe, by next Thursday. Is that right, Linnell? We can't hear you.
Oh, you can post Wednesday or Friday.
Okay, and it'll be posted in the East Bay Times, is that correct?
Bay Times, yes. I can send it tomorrow.
Okay, great. And so basically that's the reason that we're bringing it back. So the new resolution has the new date, which will be the board meeting in July, the first board meeting, or the only board meeting in July, July 8th.
Okay. Okay, I want to make sure that there is, if there's any board questions or discussions on this item. I see none. Public comment. I see none. So does anybody want to make the resolution, or does anybody want me to do that? I think it's best if you have it in front of you for sure. And I could do that if you would like me to. I can make the motion that the board adopt resolution number 2021-07, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District, declaring its intention to levy and collect assessments for the Kensington Park Assessment District for fiscal year 2021-22.
I'll second.
Thank you. I have made a motion. Director Shariswat has seconded, and let's see, Linnell, would you mind calling the roll this time?
Sure. Vice President Natoli?
Yes.
Director Deppie?
Yes.
Director Shariswat?
Yes.
And President Hassai?
Yes. Motion carries 4-0. And on to our next item, which relates to changes to the CalPERS health benefits and an MOU. And basically, we are going to be considering the adoption of a CalPERS required resolution, which fixes or establishes our employee contribution under the Public Employees Medical and Hospital Care Act at an equal amount for employees and annuitants. And Catherine will also be introducing this item.
Yes, so this is a CalPERS required resolution. The resolution is their resolution. They give this to us and we just had to fill in dates basically. But the history is at the time that the retirement resolution, the retirement resolution was filed last July, we were unaware that we also had to file a health resolution. Basically this is fixing that, and going forward, you know, they have the correct health resolution on file. There are a few things about this resolution that we should note for the future and for future negotiations. We need to consult with CalPERS when we're negotiating and make sure that our language in our MOUs in the future are conducive to what they can implement in their system. They're going to do their best and they're going to try their best to implement exactly what's in the MOU, but the system can't accommodate it exactly. There are different rates for different retirees. They're kind of all over the place. So, it has to do with that, and then it has to do with how the language is in the MOU. So in the end, I don't think this is going to affect us very much. There won't be a very small monetary effect. However, in the future, it would be good that we comply with what CalPERS needs.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the directors? And any questions from the public, or comment, I should say? Okay. I can go ahead and make the motion that we adopt resolution number 2021-08, fixing the employer contribution under the Public Employees Medical and Hospital Care Act at an equal amount for employees and annuitants, so that the employer contribution for each employer annuitant shall be the correct and necessary amount to pay the full cost of his or her enrollment, including the enrollment of family members in a health benefits plan up to a maximum of, and these rates and contributions amounts are noted in the resolution.
I'll second that motion. May I ask one quick question, Catherine?
Yes.
The Kensington POA rates, those were established by CalPERS, right?
That's correct.
Okay. They just are kind of all over the board. So, okay, great.
That's how, when you're writing your MOU, you have to take that into consideration, and their software only complies with certain things. So you have to take all these rates into consideration when they're making sure that they can do that deduction from the person's retirement, retirement check that they're getting every month. So,
okay, great. Yeah, I can see this is kind of squirrely.
Yeah, and also the other thing I didn't mention that I wanted to mention, I guess I've never realized, since I've only been working with CalPERS for the past year and a half, the two departments don't talk to each other. So retirement does not talk with health, and they do have our MOU on file in their retirement. And when I log into CalPERS, it's all one system. So I can see health and retirement. I see everything. So I didn't realize that, the two different departments have nothing to do with each other. So that, and you might ask retirement a question, but they have nothing to do with health. So.
Okay. I think we're ready to, I've already asked for comment and there is none. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Linnell to call the roll, please.
Vice President Natoli?
Yes.
Director Deppie? Director Deppie?
Yeah.
You unmute,
Chris.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, yes.
President Hassai?
Yes. And Director Sherris-Watt?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Great. Okay. We are at the end of the items on the agenda that are action or presentation, and want to open it up to see if there are any director comments. And I just have one, which is that the date of our workshop on the 17th has also been given as a date for the discussion of the hiring of a new principal at Kensington Hilltop Elementary. So many in the parent community may not be free to join. That meeting is happening at 6, and I think our meeting, do you know what time our meeting is, Marty? Is it at 7 for the budget?
It was 6. It's also 6.
It's fine. It's just going to be not everyone in the community cares about Kensington Hilltop Principal, but there will be a segment that will. So those meetings will be happening at the same time on the same day. That's it for me. Any other comments from directors? No? Okay. And general manager comments?
Just very quickly, I wanted to encourage the members of the public as well as the board, if you have any more questions about the budget that were not answered in the presentation, I would really appreciate getting an email or a phone call so that we can embed those answers in the June 17th presentation. It would be helpful. And you can either email or call, and I prefer to get that information by like noon on Monday so that we can actually update the PowerPoint and be prepared with a presentation and then get it posted 24 hours in advance. So again, that public meeting is June 17th at 6 o'clock. And then the other special meeting is June 29th at 7 o'clock for the board's consideration of the final budget. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I want to thank my fellow board members for their time today, the members of the public and our staff for everyone's good work. Our next regular meeting is, or the next special meeting as as General Manager Brown mentioned, is June 29th. That's a special meeting. And then our next regular meeting will be held on June 8th. And I guess we'll be July 8th. And stay tuned as to whether we'll be doing that July meeting in person as the state is opening up, and that is a very distinct possibility. But we'll be looking at, of course, Contra Costa in particular, Contra Costa guidance and where Contra Costa is. We are still actually in the orange tier, so we'll see how that's going. And General Manager Brown.
President Hasai, I don't know if you and the board want to mention also the board vacancy and the deadline for those applications, and that there will be some level of consideration on the June 29th agenda as well in terms of, you know, policy direction and procedure.
Correct. That application has been placed on our website, and we will be considering that if they're and discussing just the next steps going forward at the 29th. Director Deppie?
Yeah, I don't know. I was just looking for the email. We probably saw it, that the governor has basically said that something about they're not planning on rescinding Executive Order N2920 on the 15th, which was the permission to have meetings virtually. So it's still an open issue about when that order will be rescinded.
Okay, thank you.
But it's certainly not automatic that on the 15th is going away.
Okay, that's good to know. I did not know that. So we will see, because there are definitely situations of, you know, people who are not vaccinated. I, for example, and I know has a child under 12 who cannot be vaccinated, which means I have to continue to exercise great caution because I could be an asymptomatic carrier. And so even though the chances are small, it's always something to be considered. I certainly don't take that lightly, because small chance is not no chance. And you know, these things are yes.
Sort of a process question. How will that be determined? Will we as a board need to meet and discuss that? What's the, you know, it was easy to go virtually because we had to.
Yeah.
But going back is obviously a little more complicated, and everyone has their own considerations. So maybe this isn't the right venue for deciding that, but I think that process for deciding probably should be discussed among, you know, at the board level personally.
Can we put that on the agenda for the June 29th special meeting then?
Sure. Yes.
I think that would make sense. Okay. And in the meantime, obviously, everyone should just sort of read up on what they're seeing. I see that our general counsel has raised her hand.
I just wanted to interject. If that executive order is repealed that Director Deppie just mentioned, we would no longer have the option of meeting virtually in the way that we have been, because it created a waiver of the Brown Act that would go out of existence. It's really a matter for the board to decide if it wants to start meeting in person before that executive order is reversed.
Right.
That would be the question.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. Anything else, Director Deppie? Your hand's still up. You're done.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's
okay. No problem. All right, then we are adjourned. And again, thanks all, and have a good rest of your week. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.